Because you're working with really high cost of materials, it's going to be so easy to get this wrong.
Are you ready? All right, let's go.
Manufacturing is sexy. Sounds crazy? Just wait. I'm Z Holly, host of The Art of Manufacturing. Your behind-the-scenes look at how people who make stuff are trying to make it in their industries. If you've ever wondered how to build a brand, a business, or just a better mousetrap, tune in and enjoy. This week, we're talking with Ivka Adam, founder and CEO of Iconery. She's mashing up 3D printing, e-commerce, manufacturing, and influencer marketing to create a totally new kind of jewelry company. But before we get into that, we had another guest drop in honor of Earth Day. Carolyn Casavan is best known as the founder of West Coast Environmental and Engineering, a very well-respected sustainability and engineering firm. She has a wealth of knowledge from over 30 years helping companies improve their sustainability and business processes. So I was really excited to hear her advice for manufacturers and brands, especially startups who don't have a lot of bandwidth for non-mission critical things. I mean, seriously, you're barely making ends meet. Why would you worry about sustainability? But I learned how it isn't just about compliance or branding or feeling good. It actually makes really good business sense in many ways.
My approach to sustainability is when I go into a company, the first thing I do is I look at characterizing their operations. So, for example, we had a client that wanted to increase their permit for air emissions. And we said, well, let's go see if we can reduce your solvent usage instead of increasing your permit amounts. So we went in and we did this characterization of their operations. You know, most people think they know what's going on. And then they're shocked to find out what is actually going on. And so that's a really key part of it. Well, then what happens is once we've done that, the next step is to engage your people. So in that instance, we engaged the department managers.
And what were they trying to do?
So they were making electronic parts, and they used solvent to clean the parts. And people used Q-tips that they would dip in solvent to clean these parts. So in their minds, they were only using a little bit of solvent because these Q-tips were so tiny. But when we actually set up a system where they could quantify how much solvent was being used by each department manager was shocked at how much solvent was being used in their department. So this solvent was very expensive. It was like $7 a gallon. They went back to their departments, found out people were using the solvent for cleaning the plastic strips between manufacturing areas because it was a great cleaner. And they ended up replacing that with 409.
Wow.
And obviously that was a huge savings to them. So
probably not very healthy for the people using it either.
So after we finished with this whole program, the environmental manager at the company told me later that once they had implemented all these changes, their sick days went down by 30%.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So
amazing.
I like to think of it when you do sustainability, you get co-benefits instead of side effects.
I love that. I love that. But, you know, it sounds hard. You know, when you're trying to implement these things, what would be the first step to being a more sustainable company?
So a couple things here. One is taking a look at what other people are doing in your industry. There's a lot of information online, and most of the major corporations now have sustainability plans on their websites. And if you just go and search, and there's just a huge amount of information there that can give you ideas of what you could do. And of course, you're going to scale it back, but at least it gives you a starting point. And then the other thing is actually characterizing your operations. And, you know, what are the operations that are under your control? And I know many people have manufacturers that actually provide goods for them. So now you want to find out about your supply chain. What is your supply chain and what is their supply chain? So that you have an idea of what is your total picture. So that's the first place to start. And then I think the next thing to do is to sit back and say, what are your standards? Because now you're going to get the whole universe of standards. And of course, if you're a small company, you aren't going to be developing a plan that a major corporation would have, but you can scale that back. And what are your standards? You know, it's easy to know what is totally wrong and what is perfectly right. But there's this whole range in between. Just figure out where you fit on it. You don't have to be perfect, but just find a spot that you feel comfortable with. And I would say engage your employees, because when you engage your employees in this, what happens is they come up with great ideas. And, most people do care about sustainability. They can care about the environment. They care about equity. And so when you make that part of your company, your employees have a lot of pride in that. And it's amazing. I just have seen you just see a different attitude in people because they feel like they're part of something good.
And they, of course, would know best how to make the changes.
Yeah. And you know what's great about it? When they come up with the ideas, they take the initiative.
They actually do it.
That's it. You're not telling them to do it. They're really, and it's amazing. I've been very impressed with how employees just jump right in with great ideas. And
do you have an example?
So I've been working on this project recently where the approach we took to developing the sustainability plan was going out and talking to different department managers. And at first people would say, "Oh, you're going to give me something else to do." Mm-hmm. And so we start off with, "No, we want to find out what it is you're doing and how we can fit this all together and actually help you with what you're doing better." And once people started seeing that what we were trying to do was improve operations, they started to get engaged. And once they got engaged, then they started coming back to us with things they were doing. And they're just taking off. And now we're trying to keep up with them instead of the other way around. So it's great. It's just great to see it.
Any examples of specific ideas they have that you could share?
So in terms of improving the sustainability of their buildings, they have, when we started out, we thought, we will propose something that's simple for people to do so that they don't feel like it's a burden. But it turned around that they looked at it and said, no, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And so now they're looking at getting software so that they can do more detailed audits and more detailed planning on their buildings. And so they are taking it to a much higher level than what we initially were going to suggest. And it was great to see that. And I think if we had gone in there and said, do it this way, there would have been a lot of resistance. But it's their project now. And it's just great to see that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How big of a company is that?
This is like a major corporation.
The reason I ask is because when you're an entrepreneur, I mean, you're literally, sometimes the CEO is in the shipping room packaging the boxes every day. It's a little bit harder to find time or resources. So how might a company like that, how would they even put this on their priority list?
Okay, a small company doesn't really have the resources to develop their own sustainability plan. They also don't have the resources to hire a consultant to put together a sustainability plan for them. But if we could get a group of small companies, similar type operations together, and put together a general sustainability plan for that group, and then set it up in a way that they could tailor it to their individual needs, then that would be a way to do it cost effectively and still have it set up so that people still can make their own decisions.
That sounds fascinating.
And the process itself, I think, really helps companies understand better of what they actually can do. Mm-hmm. And I think people are surprised at what they can do.
Now, let's say if you're a brand that doesn't actually own your own factory, is this something that you should be worried about as well?
Yes, I think you should. First of all, when the building collapsed in Bangladesh, that was really bad press for a lot of major brands. And they now have set up a fund to help the victims of that. So what could have been less expense beforehand is, one is the PR, but also the expense afterwards of compensating. And then I think also just there's a certain amount of feelings of, gee, we should have been more responsible beforehand. I think people feel that way, that you can't help it. When somebody gets hurt or dies, you do feel a certain amount of responsibility. Looking at your supply chain, one of the things you can do is ask them about what are their sustainability practices. Okay. And if they say, we don't have any, you might want to step back and say, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you ask your supply chain about their quality control You know, there are other practices. Why not just consider sustainability, you know, the same as you would anything else you're going to ask them about? And if they don't have any kind of practices or procedures in place, then that should be a wake-up call to you that anything could be happening there. I think the other thing is, again, I think it's important to go visit. And I know that some of these factories are overseas, but if at some point if you're doing a lot of business with one supplier, it's worthwhile to go and visit and see what they're doing there.
All the more reason maybe to manufacture locally.
Well, that's a really good point. Because when you manufacture locally, one, you at least have the laws of the U.S. that are governing that manufacturing. So right there, you have a lot of safeguards that are in place, and you can go see it. I also think if you are working with suppliers that have sustainability plans, guess what? They probably are going to give you a much better quality work product as well. You know, because those things go hand in hand. As companies mature, they develop more standards for both quality control and environmental. And not just that, but also workplace conditions. So I think that's another big issue is workplace conditions. And if you go online and you look at some of these websites, there actually is an international code of conduct with regard to workplace standards.
Is there a place that you'd recommend people go, a central place, whether it's your website or someone else's website, that you could, you know, refer people to give some idea of where to start on these?
In coming to this interview, I did go to Gap and look at Gap's sustainability plan, and I went to Benetton's sustainability plan. And I will tell you, if you go to those two websites, you're just going to find a wealth of information and a lot of things that you can adopt yourself, you know, and maybe in a simplified manner, but very similar things.
Very cool. And I love your idea about how it's not all or nothing, right?
That's it. Exactly.
That said, there are certain brands that are very much purpose-driven. They're, you know, Patagonia and, you know, companies that really promote that part of it. And I'm wondering if there's recommendations you have to companies, any startup or entrepreneur or manufacturer that wants to communicate to the customer what they're doing in order to be a better company.
So couple things you can do. One, on your website, you can have a sustainability page. And if you have a very simple plan, then you can just really put your sustainability principles on that page. So if you set up, you know, really kind of a set of what are your sustainability principles, that could be on that page. You could also, as you develop certain parts of your plan, you can then have links to additional pages that will give people information on the different parts of your plan. Maybe you're doing energy efficiency and water conservation. You can have a page for that. And that's another way I think that it affects the bottom line is if you are using a lot of energy and water, putting in efficiency measures can save you money right away. Another thing is you could pick sort of like maybe 3 highlights that you would like to include on, you can include it as part of your branding. You know, it could be on your landing page. It can be on the tags you put on your goods. And depending on how serious you want to be and how much of a commitment you want to make. Because you do want to be careful if you don't want to overstate your practices, because then people see that as what they call greenwashing. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that whatever you're stating fits with what you're actually doing. Mm-hmm. Because once you start branding yourself a certain way, people will then come back and
scrutinize you.
That's it, exactly. So just make sure, mm-hmm. you know. And again, I think if you set up your principles and your standards to match where you fit on that spectrum, then if somebody comes back and scrutinizes, they're going to find the right answers because you set it up for who you are, not some imaginary thing you think you should be.
And I love it. It's definitely, there are benefits to building brand loyalty with your customers. And also, as you mentioned earlier, just you could reduce cost, health insurance premiums, all sorts of benefits to doing mm-hmm. this.
One other thing for people to keep in mind too, with access to social media, adding sustainability to your brand can really make a difference to you in terms of your whole marketing, and vice versa, you know. And I think if you look, you see that a lot of people now are actually voting with their purchases, and especially the younger generation. So if that's who you're marketing to, having some kind of sustainability component really can be beneficial to your sales and marketing effort.
How can people connect with you?
Well, you can reach me at Carolyn at casavanconsulting.com, and that's with one S on the Casavan. And I'm also happy to answer questions for people that, you know, send them in the right direction, that type of thing, or take it a step further if they would like to.
Cool. And you have a website?
I do not have a website set up.
I'll help you with that.
Oh, great. That would be good.
It's been such a pleasure having you. It's some really interesting insights that I think everybody might not put it normally first on their priority list, but I think all entrepreneurs and manufacturers should think about this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I loved how Carolyn pointed out that sustainability isn't an all or nothing thing, and there's so many more potential benefits than I realized. If you enjoyed our chat, Carolyn is speaking at the next Make It Monthly event in downtown LA this coming Wednesday, April 26th. For more information, visit makeitinla.org/events. If you want to be invited next time, sign up at makeitinla.org/connect so you never miss another event. You're listening to The Art of Manufacturing. Join the conversation on social at We Make It in LA and our Facebook group, makeitinla.org/community. We'll be right back after this break. This episode of the Art of Manufacturing podcast is supported by GE Ventures. They partner with startups in a wide range of industries to help drive better outcomes for GE's customers and society. I'm a big fan of theirs because their team is super smart and connected, especially in advanced manufacturing technologies, and they're a founding partner of the Make It in LA initiative. For more information, visit makeitinla.org/GE Ventures. I'm so glad to be talking with Ivka Adam, the founder and CEO of Iconery. She's created a unique on-demand manufacturing model for jewelry. I'm unfamiliar with the industry, so I was curious about the trends that are making her new platform possible right now. It's a tool for non-experts to access the complex and sometimes bewildering jewelry supply chain. You might call it a democratization of sorts, and so I wanted to learn more. She also has some thoughts about customer service and building a brand, and whether it's a good idea to leave your team alone for 9 days while you go hike Kilimanjaro. We hear about that and a whole lot more on this week's episode of The Art of Manufacturing.
I like to say that Iconery is the Luxottica for fine jewelry. So we are a B2B2C platform where we work with influencers, celebrities, brands to design, manufacture, fulfill their fine jewelry collections for them.
So what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so I have been in e-commerce for the past 9 years. I was at eBay doing marketplaces, and then I was at another company called Modnique that was a fashion flash sale. So I've seen the whole spectrum from true marketplaces to true e-commerce types of businesses, and I wanted to create this ideal retail model where you produce or you manufacture on demand. And I wanted to see how efficient I could make this business model. So doing things like we manufacture on demand, we use influencers to drive the customer acquisition cost. And the way it evolved into jewelry is I naturally had a passion for fine jewelry. I always have. But also we are just in the past 2 years at a place where 3D printers can produce bulk amounts of jewelry in a very short time frame, so you can actually replace parts of the supply chain with 3D printing rather than just like the molds. And CAD design software is good enough that you can actually create photorealistic versions of a piece, so you can sell from that rendering before you've ever made the piece. You can price it from the rendering or from the CAD file. And so I kind of put all these different components together to come up with this ideal retail model.
So tell us about the process of actually making jewelry. How does that happen?
Yeah. So when we work with it, I'm going to give you, let's start with, let's say Michelle Branch as an example. So we work with her, she says, I want to create a fine jewelry collection. It's actually as simplistic as we create a shared Pinterest board, secret Pinterest board, and she starts putting her ideas out there. We work with her, and then we have an in-house design team. So a woman who does the CAD design, as well as another woman who is very experienced in collection development. So we basically come up with the concept with the influencer, and then we go into creating the CAD files. We create the 3D printed molds, which is a great way to, oftentimes we'll send the 3D prints or show the 3D prints to the influencer so that they can easily iterate on a design without us having to invest in the silver version of it.
And are there special tools that will let you turn that design into multiple sizes, ring sizes, for example? So that exists.
Yeah, the CAD design software in jewelry is pretty advanced.
What are the tools called?
Oh, it's Rhino.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And then there are very highly specialized 3D printers just for jewelry as well. So when you think about 3D printers, a lot of times people think about the MakerBot printer. It's a $1,000 printer. It prints at about 100 microns. The ones we're using are $150,000 printers. They print 7 to 10 microns. So there's a huge difference in the level of granularity you can and detail that you can get.
What kind of technology are they using? Is it the resin? It's like the clear one?
There's a lot of different plastics that they use. Like you can print or you can grow. And then there's all these different waxes that you can either use to directly cast a piece of metal from. You can create a version where you create your mold out of it. There's just all these different. It's actually very, very advanced in the jewelry and dental industries. Mm-hmm. So I would say 3D printers are the most advanced in dental and jewelry.
So how did you learn the process of jewelry? Because that was new. Tell us a little bit about what brought you where you are today. What was your first job?
Yeah, I knew nothing about jewelry when I started this company. My first job was actually at Ernst & Young. I did sales and marketing for them. One of my responsibilities was running the Entrepreneur of the Year Awards program. So very early on in my career, I was being exposed to very successful LA-based entrepreneurs every year. I also ran the quarterly venture capital roundtable. So I found an entrepreneur who would let me work for him for 1 year before business school in a 9-person startup. So I'd get that, to really know what I wanted to do if I wanted to be in startups. Went to business school. In business school, I interned for eBay and Hulu and Cashwarren startup at the time called I Beat You. And then afterwards, I graduated 2009. So worst time to graduate from business school, and ended up with a job offer from eBay.
Wait a minute. So when did you graduate from undergrad?
2002. Another terrible time.
But somehow you landed on your feet.
You know what? I'd had internships at Ernst & Young before I graduated and eBay before 2009. So I was all about building my network, which gave me this soft landing.
Some lessons learned there.
Yeah. But in 2009, I had this offer from eBay, and only 5% of our class had offers. I mean, it was the worst year ever.
God, that's horrible.
Yeah, but I also had this idea for a 2-sided marketplace and event planning. I thought it was this great idea, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do my own thing. I have my MBA. I'm going to figure this out. And some of the best advice I ever got was from Chuck Davis. And I came to him with this, what do I do? And he said, he was very kind, but he was basically like, are you kidding me? You have an offer from eBay and you have kind of a half-baked marketplace idea. Like, you don't know enough to be able to do this. And he also said, you know what? You need to have a name brand on your resume. And so I went and joined eBay and was there for 4 years, which was was probably the best decision I ever made. Because as a result of it, I learned so much about e-com marketplaces. And the people I worked with every day are now very senior people at Facebook, Google, Pinterest, their startups, their VCs. So my network exploded because of who I got to work with every day at eBay. And that, as a result, has made it so much easier for me to start Iconery because of these relationships and the experience I built and the name brand at eBay. So that,
Amazing.
To have that on my resume was the single best thing I did as an entrepreneur to prepare myself for entrepreneurship.
So many universities, though, are now trying to teach students to be entrepreneurs, and there's all this encouragement around it. What do you think? Yeah, and I go speak at UCLA Anderson and USC Marshall all the time. And yeah, there's so many entrepreneurship classes, and these kids that have a lot of
like they feel like they can go and, like do anything and approach entrepreneurship. And my biggest thing to them is, if you don't have Fortune 500 company experience, if you don't have name brands on your resume, you have to do that first. If you want to start a company, you want to know what $1 billion company looks like, so that you know what you're growing into. And there's a lot of things that you learn in a big company that you avoid, as you can avoid the pitfalls from knowing that.
What was that moment when you decided to launch the startup? How did you decide to then leave? Were you still at eBay at the time?
No, I actually was recruited away from eBay to run marketing and mobile development for a fashion e-commerce company called Modnique, based here in LA. It was a startup. When I joined, it was 10 million in revenues. And by the time it was essentially acquired, it was 50 million run rate. And that was a year and a half. So that was also an incredible experience, because I got to work right with the CEO and watch him grow this company, which was incredibly helpful for how I've structured our growth model, our projections for Iconery. The company ended up being acquired by a private equity firm. They acquired the assets and ended up laying everyone off. So then I was left in this position of like, wow, that was my dream job. I don't have a dream job anymore. I don't have a team. So then I started thinking about my experiences at eBay and Modnique, and like I said, that spectrum of a true marketplace where you have zero control over the customer experience or the quality of product. And at the other end of the spectrum, in true retail, you're holding inventory, but you have complete control over the consumer experience. So what could be in the middle? Where could you draw upon the vibrancy and selection of a bunch of different designers or influencers, and have this marketplace feel, but have complete control over the manufacturing and the customer experience, and also be able to deliver everything real time. So these kind of components of the ideal retail model started coming together, and that's how Iconery was started.
Why did you not just create your own jewelry line?
Sure, we could have. And we actually do have our house line, Iconery, but building a brand is very expensive. So it means that we're spending a lot on Facebook ads and Instagram ads to get awareness out there. And there also isn't a lot of opportunity for a media moment, there's nothing new and interesting when you're just building a brand. So by bringing on influencers, we get to take advantage of their audience and the media moment that comes with their launch.
Amazing leverage that you're getting. And it seems like it's that is a real trend, is the whole influencer commerce. What does that look like in other companies?
Well, I think there's a huge shift in retail. So like originally it starts with, you're a very talented designer. And then because you're a talented designer, you gain recognition. And now that's too slow of a journey. You have to have a built-in audience in order to compete for the attention of your shared consumer. Now there are hundreds of thousands of brands instead of, 1,000 brands. So you want to have a built-in audience. The easiest way to do that is to find someone who's already built the audience, whether it's through social or through being an actress or singer, and then leverage that audience or get to that audience as your consumer.
I think that also your whole business model around the way you're doing this manufacturing is super interesting. How would you describe that? And what are the big trends that you're, in addition to the influencer commerce?
Yeah, there's a huge trend around on-demand manufacturing. The first moment that I think the retail supply chain really got turned upside down was 2008, 2009, that was really where the flash sale model, what it was born out of, where there's all this excess inventory. How do you liquidate it quickly? And then people started getting smarter about their planning for retail production. And then the next evolution is what we're in right now, which is this coming up with the technology and the processes so you can actually forecast what a design will look like or forecast what will be successful and or produce on demand.
So if you were to kind of coach another entrepreneur that wanted to get into that and wanted to be doing this on-demand production, what are your tips on doing it successfully?
First, question the existing supply chain. So question the existing model. If you're talking to a dozen manufacturers who all say sorry, these are our turnaround times. These are our order minimums. This is how this works. Work with them on seeing if they will change their existing processes. If they won't, continue to try to find people that will. That's where we got lucky. And part of it was that a woman on my team, Barbara, she's been in the jewelry industry for 40 years, knows everyone. So when she actually came to a couple different manufacturers and was like, this is what we want to do, they're like, well, that's not how we work, but you know what you're doing. We trust you. Sure, we'll rejigger a few things and figure this out with you guys.
So having that credibility is really important too.
It is.
So what are you doing that's unique here in the jewelry space? Because there are other companies. It seems like this is a moment right now.
Oh, yeah. And of course it is, because you look at this $80 billion industry in the U.S. With incredible margins, and everyone's trying to figure out how to disrupt it because it's ripe for disruption. It hasn't been disrupted yet. So everyone's approaching, and, because of the 3D printing aspect, everyone's trying to figure out what's the right disrupted model in the jewelry space. And it's because you're working with really high cost of materials, it's going to be so easy to get this wrong, because you can't do fine jewelry at $30, $35 and throw a bunch of Facebook ads and drive sales. Like, it's really difficult to figure out simply because the cost of materials are higher than any other industry you're really working in. So the reason why I think we're doing it right is, I put together my experience with retail, e-commerce, marketing, and then immersed myself in supply chain for a year. I think we're doing it right. I've also been really open to iterating at any point in time. I thought we were going to be pure play e-com, and then I started having retailers come and asking to carry our goods, and I was like, all right, let's test it. So I guess we've been really flexible. I think an interesting thing is when you see really high growth or high success very early on, it can sometimes hamstring you down the road. That's a nice way of putting it for us, where we did not see something like successes right out of the gate. So it meant that we've tested everything, and we're rapidly iterating to, figure out how to get that hockey stick growth to really accelerate.
So what are the easy mistakes that everyone's falling into?
One, just building a brand. It's so expensive to build a brand right now. Unless you have a really big influencer paired with your brand, you can forget about it. It's going to be incredibly expensive. Another mistake is being just a pure marketplace. So being an e-com retailer where you're not touching any of the manufacturing, that's where you get a lot of the efficiencies. But when you're simply an e-commerce site for the best designers in jewelry, there's nothing that really differentiates you, and there's nothing that gives you proprietary control over the margins.
Can you apply this to other industries in the future?
I think so. I really do think that there are some unique challenges for jewelry because the cost of materials. So this is another interesting thing about jewelry. So you're working with caustic chemicals, really high temperatures, expensive cost of materials. So if you think about it, there's really only two major jewelry districts in the U.S., downtown LA and downtown New York. And these buildings, you can't just pop up a jewelry supply chain, like a casting, stone setting, just anywhere, because you have to have the right permitting, zoning, security in place. So it's not as flexible. You can open up supply chains for other goods anywhere very quickly and easily. You just can't do it in jewelry.
That's so interesting. So let's say if I wanted to design a jewelry line, would you work with me, or do I have to be an influencer?
Today we would not work with you, but maybe in the future.
That's okay. I don't have any sense for jewelry.
as long as you can push sales, you can have a line.
Right. So how do you pick that talent? How do you decide who you're going to work with? Are you super selective? It sounds like.
Yeah, we are. We've been very lucky because we've had a lot of inbound interest, and our team, Andrea Lynette's our creative director, and she was one of the founders of Lucky Magazine. She's been in the fashion industry for a couple decades. So her personal network are, influencers. So a couple key things that we really looked at. First of all, fine jewelry. Our average order value is right around $470. So, fine jewelry is not a low price point item just because the cost of goods are so high. So when we pick influencers, we pick people who their audience is 35 to 44. They also have their audience also has to be one that is interested in design and luxury. And so we're very specific about who we pick because they have an affinity for the product in terms of their audience demographics, but then also their brand.
And how do you determine that? Is that pretty much standard, just based on their Facebook and social media profiles?
Yeah, it's like how they're known in the world, like their personal brand, their personal following. And then, I mean, we do have some proprietary data crunching that we do to really understand how well they can drive sales.
Did you have any surprises along the way? Something that really bombed or something that was way better than you expected?
Actually, we did have a nice surprise. So my assumption with Rashida Jones was that because she's an actress, so as an actress, people aren't used to necessarily consuming from her other than in an entertainment fashion. So I was not sure how people would translate following her from a media consumption to true material consumption. And as it turns out, I mean, she's been a breakout success. So that was a little nice surprise. Whereas like Michelle Branch, people they think about consuming her songs, like buying her pieces, buying her t-shirts, they'll consume from her. Or a fashion blogger is always talking about the brand that she's wearing. And so her followers are already in the mindset of material consumption.
So has that changed your selection criteria then? A little bit more flexible?
Yeah.
What do you have coming up? What kind of any big launches?
Well, the first piece in Michelle Branch's collection just launched, but she's doing a piece with each single that comes out and then a final piece with her album that's released in April. So watch for that.
Do we have a date yet?
I believe her date is April 7th. So
right,
that's when the final piece.
We'll keep an eye out for that. Awesome. So you have a really varied background, and I'm wondering, what did eBay teach you about jewelry?
Well, definitely nothing about jewelry. But, one of the key things I learned, so eBay from day one said we'll never compete with our sellers, which I think has sort of hamstrung them in a sense because it meant they could never come out with their own private label of goods. And we've seen how Amazon has really succeeded in doing that. So I made a point when starting Iconery to have our own branded line of jewelry box staples, just very much basics. So no one could claim that they came up with the design for that first. But we started with that out of the gate because I didn't want to have to launch it later and have anyone say, oh, now you're competing with us.
I had the exact thing happen with a startup I was involved in where we started B2B and then we became a consumer site and it was challenging. Yeah, that's a really common problem. So is any technologies that are starting to help you with that now with this real-time fulfillment, let's say, Internet of Things? What are some of the things that you're looking towards right now?
It would be really helpful if there was a technology around ordering and fulfillment in the jewelry industry. But as it turns out, the manufacturers are, our casters, sewn setters, very, very old school. So initially I thought maybe there was an opportunity to build sort of that system so that we could automatically talk to our manufacturers. But first of all, manufacturing is incredibly fragmented. So there's not even like unified huge manufacturers that we have access to or that exist.
And where are they?
Our manufacturers, we primarily work with two in Los Angeles and one in Florida. So that's the big piece of technology that we're missing. That's still a very manual thing on our end, but that's something where eventually I'd like to be able to tackle just to streamline our process.
So right now, what's the process like?
It's very manual. But I always believe that it's really important to understand each process manually, like really, really understand it really, really well so that because it makes it so much faster and more efficient to actually build the technology later or know what technology to buy later. I'll give you another example of this, especially in the marketing side of things. We literally text every single one of our customers after certain periods of time, just ask, like, how's your ring? Like, how are you liking your piece? And they text back with us. I actually had a friend ask yesterday, oh, I got the text message for the earrings I bought. I figured it was a bot, but I was really impressed with how real the conversation was. And I was like, oh no, you're really texting with a real person.
Really? You really are doing it with,
So we are doing this manually, but ultimately we now know the kinds of conversations we have that we would easily be able to build that technology to say like, okay, let's automate this, like let's turn it into a bot. So I'm always about like, let's do everything the long way before we try to figure out the shortcut.
And you often hear about the shortcut after the fact without actually hearing what the whole process was to get there.
But then there's also a lot of like ad tech or marketing companies that are trying to give you the shortcut first, so you never have to do the long way. And I think that's a huge mistake. So I don't even want to look at potential chatbot customer support things out there anyway yet, because I really, really want to understand and I want to get that customer feedback. I don't want to necessarily use technology to while we're still like really building our core business.
How many employees do you have?
We have a team of 6.
Oh, wow. So you get a lot of leverage out of your 6 people. But then, of course, you outsource your manufacturing.
Right.
Yeah. What was the actual crux of, you went from being a tech person, at eBay to being a manufacturer in a sense?
Yeah. It's really funny. I never knew I'd know how to make jewelry. Like being at eBay and then fashion e-commerce, Modnique, I did think that we could throw up a website and put some Facebook ads against it, and all of a sudden we'd have people coming to buy. And as it turns out, it's not as easy as just throwing up a website and putting some ads against it. So I would say the biggest surprise I had was just how hard it was to get the first couple customers, even though we launched with incredible press. Women's Wear Daily did the exclusive. We were in InStyle the first day we launched. We had incredible influencers that were supporting us. I very quickly realized that our price points, it's a consideration price point. So it takes a good 4 to 6 weeks for someone to make a purchase decision. And so then building that kind of timeline, or, working backwards from, 6 weeks to make a purchase decision. Now, how do I build the business? Can I shorten that 6-week time frame? And we started with the idea of democratizing access to manufacturing for anyone. But I very quickly realized that in order for us to prove the model and get out there quickly, that's why we had to focus on launching with really big name influencers as soon as possible. And we can then, start with the big ones and then work downwards.
So that's right. You started with your basic line. Did you have the plan to do the influencers too?
Yeah, we did. I mean, we actually started with, I think we had about 5 full collections. They had brand affinity that matched the Iconery girl, like the Iconery brand, but they weren't huge name influencers with big audiences. So I was going to start there and then just like open it up to everyone. And I realized, you know what? I think we need to take a couple steps back, just go for huge influencers, and then we can eventually get to a point where you could even design your own jewelry. But I have to have the audience and the awareness first.
Absolutely. You talk about climbing mountains in your spare time. I mean, that wasn't just a one-time thing.
I do Mount Whitney every summer.
Every summer.
Yeah.
So
at least
how
once.
long does it take for you to be able to walk again after that?
Yeah, no, I need a lot of rest afterwards. No, but it was actually when I was at eBay and I realized my entire life had become my job and I was there, in the dark, leaving in the dark, that I realized I need something else to balance me. And it came into my head one time when I was doing the Santa Monica stairs to climb Kilimanjaro. And then I did that and I realized I really find my happiness out there. And it's something even this last summer, I took 9 days off and did the last 80 miles of the John Muir Trail, like got my team fully set up. I mean, we're a startup and I still took 9 days off, like completely off the grid.
And did you do it with a friend this time?
No, I did it by myself.
I think that was a wise choice.
No.
But that's pretty badass. Most people would not go backpacking by
I
themselves.
highly recommend to entrepreneurs that at some point early on, go off the grid because one, it rejuvenated myself, or I got rejuvenated. And second, it allowed me to come back and see, okay, how did my team do without me? So I got to see where there were some pitfalls, where there's some successes from me being gone. And it actually helped me reframe the way I interacted with the team and the way I set the team up because I had taken the time away.
I love that. So you hike and backpack to rejuvenate yourself. Yeah, what is it like to be a CEO?
Two things that make me most proud is the fact that I set an intention to create a culture where the people want to be there and feel like they're able to be entrepreneurial without having to start their own company, which I've succeeded at. And then the second thing is like setting out with the intention to put customers first. And literally every text message we get back, survey response from buyers is like, oh my gosh, we love your pieces. I'm wearing it right now. Like such positive feedback. So as CEO, to have built a company where I'm providing for my employees, they're living their passions, and I'm making consumers happy is like the coolest thing ever.
That's awesome. So what are the tips that you come away with for both of those things? If you were to advise an entrepreneur that says, I want to create a culture first company, how do I do that? How did you do that?
Well, I also was at eBay during turnaround. So like I saw a really horrible culture and I got lucky enough to be selected to be on the employee engagement committee for the president. So there were 7 of us that did a ton of research looking at basically what does a culture first organization look like? We studied case studies like Google's head of HR, their philosophy on culture, evaluating what we were doing right, what we were doing wrong. I got to see and put into practice a lot of mechanics for that.
So what are some of those things that you learned?
Oh, well, the first most important thing is to ask your employees, what do you want to be acknowledged for? Because the biggest mistake you can make, actually with anyone in your life, is assuming that you know what their purpose is or what makes them happy. So you'll get responses that'll sometimes surprise you. So someone's like, I'd like to be acknowledged for being an employee. Like I'd like to be acknowledged for being a really great mom. Well, when you know that their thing that makes them happiest in life is being a mom, then you're like, how can I have this organization support you and what?
Did that happen?
No, actually that's not a case in Iconery, but that is a case in previous companies.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's the number one thing I do when I talk to, I'm always asking them, what do you need to do your job better? Which I know is a really obvious question, but a lot of times people are kind of afraid to ask for things. So one of my employees drives from West Hollywood to Venice. So I one time did the drive and I was like, holy shit, Amanda, like, I can't believe you have to do this twice a day, like in traffic. Do you want to work from home? Like any day where I don't feel like I'm going to be in the office enough or it doesn't make sense for her to be there, I'm like, I text her in the morning, like, work from home today. And as a result, like, it makes her quality of life better. She's ride or die. So
it is so funny what makes employees happier. I remember once if you go into any manufacturing, a factory, one of the things that I find really striking in many places is the lunchroom is like 20 microwaves. And it's because they all have their lunch at the same time. They have a very short amount of time and, they bring their lunch from home. And I remember I was in one factory and I made a comment and they said, you know what? Yeah, our CEO asked in a company meeting once, what do you want? And they all said microwaves. So we want 6 microwaves. Okay, you got 6 more microwaves. And now they're happy.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have thought of that.
Exactly.
What about making it a customer service culture?
So I think a huge mistake in retail is when you delegate customer support to minimum wage employees. I love the term think completely. So every single person in the company has to spend time doing like purchase orders. They have to do packaging and shipping. They have to like quality control, and they have to answer customer emails. Everyone in the company has to do that. It identifies problems. It means that because you know what the marketing campaign is or something like that, and you're reading an email, you almost like can identify issues from a more 360 holistic view. And you're also answering these consumers with a more holistic view. And so I would actually flip customer support on its head and say, pay those people really, like have them really involved in all parts of the organization, pay them a lot, and get them so they're like, they own this business for you rather than it being delegated to lower level underpaid employees.
There's 3 questions I like to ask everybody.
Okay.
So the first one is, what does success look like for you? What are you really excited about as your next big thing?
It's a funny question because I feel really successful right now, just especially since we're in the middle of doing these customer feedback loops with the text messages and the surveys. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe like we are accomplishing everything we set out to do with our consumers. I'm so excited about that. So success is continuing to build a brand on this very customer-centric, high quality, but accessible experience.
To build on that, how are you capitalized right now? Do you have VC investment?
We do.
But are there certain expectations of where you're going to go as a result of that?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I love having venture capital because it's always driving you to think about how you can make the business more efficient and grow quicker without sacrificing quality. So I always get the question, we're raising money right now. I always get the question, well, like, explain how this is a $100 million business. So I'm always being pushed to think, like, how do we get there quicker?
Not with only 6 employees.
Like, how do we get there and how do we get there quicker? Mm-hmm. It's actually, we can actually do this on a very small team because it's mostly about, once we launch a 6 to 12 piece collection, I mean, it only takes 6 employees to do that. And then it's on to our manufacturers who can handle thousands of units a day and then get that distributed. We don't actually have to grow the company that much in order to take on really huge
interesting
brands or people.
Are those pieces evergreen? Can that income really be passive in a way? Or is it short term? Are you trying to feel like, oh, this is your window of opportunity to buy this collection?
No, it's pretty much evergreen.
Got it. Oh, interesting. Okay, now I went off the reservation. That was just the first of three questions. Okay, next question.
Yeah.
So what's keeping you up at night? What is the thing that, the biggest challenges that you're facing right now in order to achieve that goal?
As like any startup, the team is certainly overworked and underpaid, and we're hustling every single day. And so the thing that keeps me up at night is making sure that everyone is still feeling happy and positive and ride or die about the company day in and day out, knowing that we've got a couple more years of like grinding and hustle to get to something where we're either profitable or, we bring on a big enough team or like enough venture investment, or we get the big break, creating Rihanna's jewelry collection that gives us that ability to kind of breathe a little bit more. We're nothing without the team, and I've got to make sure they stay happy.
What is the one thing you wish you had known that you'd want to share with other entrepreneurs? Kind of a lesson learned.
The first thing that comes to mind is how hard this is. That's obviously not an encouraging answer. Okay, so I'm essentially a solo founder. And the thing I just didn't anticipate is how hard it would be to be a solo founder. So,
do you wish you had had partners?
Yeah. I mean, I loved my 2 co-founders, and it was like a total amicable split. Yeah. But oh my God, I really wish I had a co-founder.
There was a study done, I remember, when I was starting my first company. I won't say how long ago that was. But it said that the success of a startup is directly related to the number of founders you have. Up to 5. After that, there's too many cooks in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely they're correlated.
Yeah. And I was lucky to have them in like a really critical part of the business where we were just, figuring out the business model. But like I said earlier, when you're generating this every day, like no one else is also generating this every day with me in the capacity I am. And so it's exhausting. And that's why I really wish I had a co-founder, or in this case, like I'm hiring a COO position, and to have that person be like mind meld with me and like drive this business forward.
Hear that? Art of manufacturing community, COO position,
yes.
At an awesome startup.
Hiring. I will pay you.
Or investors. It's such a brilliant model that you have, and it seems like the right place at the right time, and you're executing.
Thank you.
Really well. So I'm really excited for you to see where this is going to go.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited too.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
My conversation with Ivka had several hidden gems. First, I liked the concept of democratizing the manufacturing process. In reality, you and I can't use it to develop our own lines yet, But it is interesting to learn how the soaring price of gold and other quirks of the jewelry industry let a handful of early influencers dominate until Iconery came along. And it's so hard to build a brand, it's very smart how much marketing leverage they get through their influencers. Speaking of which, if you want to check out Michelle Branch's latest piece, which just launched with her album last week, visit iconery.com. Also, I liked Ivka's stories about rolling up her sleeves and really understanding the nuts and bolts of the business before trying to cut corners or automating, especially when it comes to customer service. Finally, Ivka's career path out of college might provide an important lesson for aspiring young entrepreneurs these days. She gained invaluable connections and experience working at Ernst & Young and eBay and various other startups before launching her own company. I loved her quote that if you want to start a company, you want to know what a billion-dollar company looks like. Of course, if you want to start a billion-dollar company. I would never discourage a student from pursuing their entrepreneurial passions, but there is a lot of value from corporate experience first. My colleagues and I did a study a few years ago, funded by the Kaufman Foundation, called The Anatomy of an Entrepreneur. It showed that the most successful founders started their companies with plenty of industry experience under their belts, with an average age of 40. So, if you don't have that killer idea yet, there's no rush. Oh, and according to Ivka, you should go hike Kilimanjaro. Leave your team to do its thing and make yourself dispensable for once. Time to wrap it up for The Art of Manufacturing. Tune in next week. I have 2 great guests in mind, and to be honest, I can't decide yet. So you'll just have to wait until next Thursday to find out who it is. Visit makeitinla.org for show notes and to stay in the loop about events, news, and resources. To chat with other like-minded manufacturing entrepreneurs, join our Facebook discussion group at makeitinla.org/community. Never miss an episode. Subscribe on iTunes, Google Play Music, or your favorite player. And if you like the show, do us a big favor and leave us a review. Or send us a message with feedback and ideas on Twitter at WeMakeItInLA. This podcast is produced by At Large and Dangerous in collaboration with the Make It in LA initiative and other partners. A big shout out to Peter Brandenburg, the producer and audio engineer, and our content coordinator, Heidi Carrion. This episode was recorded at the Reef in downtown Los Angeles. Thanks for listening to The Art of Manufacturing. I'm Z Holly, and remember, don't just make it, make it.